Hey everyone, and welcome to Crusher Convo, where we are crushing the conversation one episode at a time. Today, I have Dayton Ward with us, and we are going to be discussing his love for Star Trek and all of his work. So, thanks, Dayton, for joining me tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, first off, I really want to thank you for your service. I was reading a bit about your bio and stuff like that. I have family and friends who have been in the service, and so I wanted to say that first off.
I appreciate that. It was a long time ago, but I appreciate that.
Now, originally you not only was in the service, but you also started as a software developer. Is that correct?
Yeah,
And
I joined the service thinking I would do my 4 years and get my college money and go learn about computers. But they offered a computer occupational field, so I went that way, and I ended up enjoying myself doing what I was doing. I was not married at this point. So I, instead of getting out after one hitch, I re-enlisted, and then I did it again one more time. And then by that point I was married, and my wife and I decided that it was a good time uh, to exit. She was
mm-hmm.
getting tired of moving around, didn't want to move again.
Oh, I
Um,
bet.
so, and I, we were, and I, at that point I had been relocated to Kansas City, which at the time was the home of the Marine Corps' Pay and Personnel Center. So as an
Okay.
IT person, it's almost inevitable that you end up here in Kansas City at that point in time. And it's a very small community. The Marine, at least at that time, the Marine Corps IT community was very small. So you either knew everybody or heard of everybody or knew who to avoid, or that kind of thing. And the job market in the late 90s was very good in IT. So I opted
Mm-hmm.
to exit the military and go to the private sector. And I stayed a developer for another 18 years as a civilian
Wow.
before finally giving
Now,
that up.
now, going from that to being a full-time writer, was the transition difficult for you, or was it easy because it was something you wanted to do?
I had started writing on the side years before, maybe 13 years before I hung it up and became a full-time writer. So I was writing on the weekends and at night and on holidays and wherever I could find spare time. And of course I was working a pretty long week as a developer. I was working 55, 65 hour weeks, were not uncommon. Um,
Right.
and burning the candle at both ends, and I would have been happy to remain a developer, but it became less and less about being a developer and more about surviving the next layoff. And so I started to sour on the whole idea of just surviving and hanging on by my fingernails. And then I
Yeah.
finally, my number finally came up. I was finally on the list of people getting laid off, and I was all sitting at my desk at home, updating my resume and trying to get up the courage to uh, try to find an interview, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and sweating bullets a little bit because we had just bought a house and a new house and moved our kids into it, and so. But by that point, I've been writing full time. I've been writing professionally for over 10 years at that point, and
Yeah.
so I had acquired a nice little network of connections and people that I could reach out to about possible work opportunities. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of them used to tell me that they would have hired me to do more work at the time if I had more time to give them, but I never did. I always had to balance the novel I was working on or the book I was working on with my day job. And so
Right.
I reached out to a couple of those editors and I said, how you always tell me that you'd hire me more often if I was more available? Well, hey, and so because
Guess what?
my wife convinced me to give up trying to find a replacement IT job and just write full time for a while and see how it worked out.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be 10 years ago in September that I
Wow.
gave up the full time corporate gig and went writing full time.
Did you do any ghostwriting?
I've done some ghostwriting here and there. Obviously, because of what that entails, I can't say who I ghostwritten
Of
for or
course.
what I've
Yes.
ghostwritten, but I have picked up the occasional ghostwriting gig because the money was, good at a time when it needed to be there. So, because
Mm-hmm.
there have been some lean years on the writing front, I've written things that I don't normally write or would not normally go out of my way to write, but it's
Right.
fun because I get a very, very, I get a very eclectic background as far as what I can write. So,
Okay.
but no, I definitely would prefer to write under my own name. Uh,
Oh yeah. I think it was interesting because Carrie Fisher was a ghostwriter for
mhm,
scripts and things like that, and
yeah,
I think it worked in her favor because her name was People knew who she was.
Well, I mean, that's
So,
kind of the thing is like it started out as an editor who, I had worked with in the past, uh, asked me he called me one afternoon and asked me about, hey, I've got a book, the author's having trouble. Do you think you could help step in and finish it or help them finish it? And, I
mhm,
can't pay you a lot of money, but, I'll owe you a huge favor. And I said, it's okay. What's the topic? And they told me, and I was like, well, that's not my normal wicket of writing.
right.
And so, definitely not my normal thing. And so
Right.
I did that. And then he would come out, he would probably reach out to me about once or twice a year for these little quick burn short novel projects in
Mhm.
a genre that is definitely not my normal one that I'm known for. And I would write under a house name, or I would write under a different name or something like that. And so
Right.
I'm still, you know, again, it was fun. I wou't have done it if I didn't think I could have some fun with it, or at least get interested
Right.
enough in the idea to get behind it. I didn't strictly do it for the money. And I thought, well, there's going to come a time when I'm going to give up writing Star Trek, and maybe that genre will be open again. So, we'll keep
You
it. We'll
give up
keep it.
Star Trek? No, let's not talk
Yeah.
about that, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean,
Now,
when you're freelance, you go wherever the money is and the
that
projects.
is true. That is. Now, you said that the original series is what got you into Star Trek. So, what was it about the show that you loved so much?
Well, I mean, I started watching the reruns when I was a little kid. I mean, I was in,
Hmm.
first, second grade, and I would come home and I would watch that rerun of the original show
Right.
after school. And it was my mother's lone exception to the homework before TV rule, was she let me
Nice.
watch the Star Trek rerun.
Was she a
Um,
fan?
no, she had absolutely
Oh,
no use
okay.
for science fiction at all until the day she died. She was like, I can't believe they pay you to write that crap. That's a verbatim quote. But at the same time, she was a huge, she was my biggest fan, so she was like
Yeah.
the official president of the Tampa chapter of my fan club. But no, she never saw what I saw. She never understood what I saw. And she's like, and my father was even less tolerant of it. I mean, she at least helped me buy the comic or the book or the poster or whatever, the toy, when I was that age. My father had no use for science fiction whatsoever. He was a Western and a military guy. And
Got
so,
it.
uh, but I enjoyed it because, when I was a kid, it was an action adventure show. And then the older I got, I started to see the different layers of meaning and messaging in some of the episodes, and the quality of the writing, and, what they were able to do with the limited effects technology that was available to them back then, and how story, became the driving factor to make up for those deficiencies or lack of ability or whatever.
Hmm.
And then by the time the movies came along, I was 12 when the first movie came out. So, the hook was set pretty deep by that point, because I'd been eating
Yeah.
those reruns and reading the books and the comics up for all those years. So I've been pretty hardcore about it since I was, a little kid.
Yeah. Now, your books are very heavily like Star Trek, like as you can see here. And this is just your most recent books that you've done, and you've done Discovery, and like we'll talk about Coda and Next Generation, the original series. Now, is there a franchise though that you would love to write for?
Oh, that's not Star Trek? Oh,
That's
absolutely.
not
There
Star
are
Trek.
there there
Yeah.
are several that I would love to write for. Off the top of my head, the Alien franchise, the Predator franchise. For older properties, like from when I was a kid, I grew up watching, along with the reruns of the original show. I watched, the $6 Million Man and the Planet of the Apes and
Mm-hmm.
Space 1999 and all those shows. And if a publishing program ever focused on one of those properties, I'd be on it. I did get to write a Planet of the Apes short story for an anthology several years ago, and that was a lot of fun. I would
Oh,
totally do that
nice.
again. But as far as newer properties, yeah, I'd write for Alien and Predator, and let's see. I mean, Firefly would be a fun one, but I think that's a pretty closed loop as far as availability for writers. Uh, I guess I have a Star Wars. I don't know if I have a Star Wars book in me, but it would have to be like an old school kind of Star Wars book, like Han and Chewie on the Falcon doing something, getting into some kind of trouble.
I would
So
love that. I would love that.
I don't know.
There's
So
probably enough ideas out there for Star Wars to think of something, especially in those adventure times. Is there a book that you're the most proud of that you've written?
they're all my children, so it's
Yeah.
hard to pick between them. And I think I'm grounded enough that I can say that not every every book represents my best work. I think, but I do think they all represent the best work I was able to do at the time I was writing the book. I always have regrets about something in every book I wrote. Like, I wish I'd have done that better, or I wish I'd remembered to do this, or something like that. As far as the ones that I'm most proud, I don't know if I'm most proud, but I guess the ones that I would recommend if you're trying to sample me for the first time, would be like Agents of Influence, the original series novel. And I recommend that mostly because it's a standalone book that you don't have to read other books to understand it. But if you want to get into, if you really want to get into it, I mean, I love the Vanguard series. That is probably the most fun I've ever had writing Star Trek, is those books, those Vanguard books that Kevin and I wrote with David Mack. And that was just such a gas to be able to do something like that, which, was fairly unprecedented at the time. I mean, they were doing a lot of spinoff shows for the 24th Century series in books, but this was the first real serious attempt to do something for the original, that went alongside the original show. That was successful. And then they let us off the chain and let us pretty much do whatever we wanted, within reason. But I mean, the lines were way over. So we just, I mean, as people always used to say, if you look at the original, if they call the original series Wagon Train to the Stars, then Vanguard was Deadwood in space, So so but we're all of us who participated, we're all huge fans of the original show. We love the original show. We're very protective of it, and so we definitely wanted to honor the show, but yet give readers some additional insight into some of the things that they may have seen on an episode or in a movie. And then when they watch those episodes, they get the connection that we tried to build with Vanguard. We're all still very protective about it. Whenever somebody says, "Hey, what about a Vanguard?" Stop! Don't even go there. We don't. We've had a couple
That's
folks
your baby,
think about.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, "We want to write a Vanguard thing for the role playing game," and we're like, "Not while the rest of us are still alive. You're not." That kind of thing. I mean, no. I mean, it's a good natured thing, but we've even resisted doing it. It's like when we did the Seekers books, which are a spinoff of Vanguard, we made the pact that we would not revisit the main Vanguard characters after the events of the Vanguard novels. We felt that their story was done, and we wanted to honor that. And so Dave wrote a book that came out last year. That's an original series book that ties into the Vanguard storyline, but it's set during the events of the series. And the event of the Vanguard series. So he wrote me a letter, an email, and he says, "What do you think about this? You think I get away with this?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, you're the guy that created the concept, or I think if anybody's going to get away with it, it's going to be you." And
right.
And you're honoring our pact by not revisiting characters after that chapter's closed. So
Exactly.
and it ended up being a great book that slots in very nicely with the rest of the Vanguard novels. So.
Oh, nice. Now, of course, everyone knows, and I know we had talked when we had met in Salt Lake, that I started Star Trek in 2022. And when I got into the Next Generation and I was about to see Star Trek Picard, everyone was like, "You got to read Coda." Like, that was their recommendation. They're like, "You got to read Coda." And I'm all like, "Okay," not knowing what I was getting myself
Right.
into.
I was going to say, I don't know that I'd call that your entry point. That's not an ideal entry point. So
that was my entry point. Now, you guys did end that timeline of those books so beautifully to coincide with Picard. Was it hard for you, though, to end that timeline, that you guys been doing since Nemesis? Like,
it was excruciating. I mean, opinions vary, and that's totally valid, that, about what we did. And I totally respect that. But I mean, anybody who doesn't think that we agonized over every decision that we made for those books does not know us and does not know what we went through. It was very challenging. I mean, the challenge was probably the thing that intrigued me the most about it, and what we were doing. And we wanted to do something right. We thought would do right by the continuity, but we get that it's a controversial choice. We just didn't want to do the easy choice, So, and to be fair to Dave and Jim, they had to convince me to do certain things in the series. And I was just like, I don't know, man, that seems like, I guess I was the holdout for something different. And, but they convinced me, and I don't regret the choice that we made. I'd like to think that we did right by the whole line. Like I said, I know opinions vary, and those are all valid, and I respect that. But it was definitely not from a lack of caring or lack of trying. There's some guy out on there that hates us because we did the books and hopes we all burn in hell or whatever. And I'm just okay. Well, whatever. Right. Get in line, take a number, because you're not the first one to ever wish that on me. But it's
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
I mean, we had
People
it
are
was
very passionate.
the studio. The studio was very supportive of us when we said we'd like to try to do
Yeah.
something to wrap up the storylines, and they said swing for the fences. You're not going to have to do this again. And so knowing that this was the last time we get to write this version of the characters, definitely weighed on us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there were some
Yeah.
animated conversations. There was definitely some animated conversations all through the development of that thing because we were just like, really, we're going to do that? Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
again, don't regret it. I just don't. I'm
Mhm.
not eager to do something like that again anytime soon. So
You're still recovering from this event.
yeah, it was tough. It was
Now,
tough to write some of those scenes because I was like, this is the last time I'm going to get it right.
well,
Picard
you got
this
to
way.
kill Wesley and then bring him back. Like,
That was I don't think we didn't consciously set out to do that in every book. All three books, but it just worked out that way. What's really crazy is just the idea that Wesley was this traveler that could pop in and pop out was something that we
yeah.
had planted in the books years ago.
Right.
Going all the way back to like Cold Equations and a few other books that had hinted at that ability of Wesley's. And so when we were doing the Coda thing, we decided to lean into that idea. And so I had I had just been watching Doctor Who, catching up on the Doctor Who, and I had just fallen in love with the War Doctor, John Hurt's incarnation of the Doctor. And
Okay.
he's if you're not familiar with the continuity of that show, he's the unnamed Doctor that fought the Time War against the Daleks. And he's not even recognized among the main lineup at this point in time. And so he's like that grizzled soldier who did all the dirty work and all the hard, and he's like he basically sacrificed himself, and he's the unknown hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had an image in my head of old Wesley. In fact, we were calling him Old Man Wesley in the outlines, or at least in our early going in our notes, going off the Logan, the Old Man Logan comic idea. And so we thought, okay, we're going to use different incarnations and different ages of him throughout the storyline. And then we came up with our storyline for the Davidians to be the time eaters, destroying all these timelines and feeding off that energy, And so, it was a lot of, we had a lot of emails and Skype sessions and whatever before we even wrote the first outline. Or we went to our corners and wrote the outline. Then we looked over each other's work, and we looked over each other's manuscript, and there was two people doing the copy edits and proofreaders and the editors, and we still made mistakes. That's what is uncanny. Is like we still made bonehead mistakes. I'm just like, that's writing.
It happens. Now it's funny because I was going to say that Coda did have that timey-wimey Doctor Who feel as I was reading it. I'm a Whovian. I know you are too. And so that's where I kind of really enjoyed it, because you couldn't anticipate where you were going to go with the story. And that's what made it exciting for the reader.
And we talked about it. We talked about, killing off certain characters, and, we knew that this was going to be a bloodbath, at some point. And we knew that we had to, like, really, proverbially speaking, or, figuratively speaking, punch the reader in the mouth early on and make it real. So that's why we did what we did in the first book. We decided we were going to
my heart out with the whole Beverly Wesley dying part. I was like, I can't.
Yeah. I know. And then I bring him right back as an older guy. Yeah. And so, we knew we had to raise the stakes really, quickly in the book. And then, and then the people were mad at me when they read the first book and the second book hadn't come out yet. And I'm just like, if you think this was bad, wait till we get to book 2. And then, if you think that's bad, Dave is in the dugout. Dave is in the on deck circle, and he is swinging. And so, I mean, this was not a gleeful thing. It was just like, wow, you guys, you have no idea what we're, and even Paramount was they didn't give us any sort of notes about, scaling it back or toning it down or making it a happier ending. They were in our corner the entire time.
That's nice.
Again, it was it was a unique opportunity because this is not the canon version of the characters now. And so once we were freed from that, because up until that point we had been treating it like these are the canon characters that they keep going after Nemesis. In our hearts, this is the Star Trek canon. Because we had no idea they were ever going to bring back any of these people. I mean, we went for years without any kind of idea that they would do this. So we were given a tremendous amount of latitude and support from the folks at Paramount, and which was, let us do all these, things like promoting characters and marrying characters and moving them off to other adventures and other ships and getting, having kids and all that kind of thing, things that they would never let us do when the show was in production or the films were in production. So, when it came time, we had to kind of sit back and on our haunches a little bit and go, man, all this is going away. And there's two ways to look at it. We can either just pretend it never happened, or we can make it count for something, or try to come
Right.
off making it count for something. And so that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I got your book
I
when we were in Salt, and you wrote. See if I could do this.
don't know if I can read
All
it.
hail. Let me see everything. All hail the
The
wormhole
wormhole
death
death
cannon.
cannon. Yeah.
Please explain.
So we had a private chat thing going on Twitter, or the service formerly known as Twitter. And so we had a
Yeah.
private message loop between the three of us. And Jim Swallow was the one who came up with the name Wormhole Death Cannon. And so that became the title of our message group. And then at some point,
Nice.
I got the idea we should make T-shirts, band shirts. We're going to make this our death metal futuristic band. So I quickly put together a logo for us for Wormhole Death Cannon, and Dave created the concert tour list on the back of the shirt, with all the planets all the locations that get visited in the three books. And
Nice.
so we got permission from Paramount to create a very small number of these T-shirts, so that we could have one for ourselves and one for the people who helped us realize the trilogy. It's like the folks at
Mm-hmm.
Paramount, the folks at Simon and Schuster, and a few other individuals who were huge help. So yeah, people keep asking us if they can buy the shirt, and I have to break their heart. I'm like, we're not allowed to sell it. We were allowed to make a limited number of shirts without attracting
Yeah.
the evil eye. And
Yeah. Exactly.
so we had,
So.
but last year was the first time that all of us had been together in years, but also since the trilogy had come out. So Dave, Jim, and I were at Shore Leave last year with Scott Pearson, who's our copy editor, and the four of
Mm-hmm.
us got a reunion photo. We called it our one and only reunion tour, one and only stop on our one and only reunion tour. So we rarely get a picture of it
Oh, nice.
with all of
Now,
us
when
wearing our
I
shirts.
that's so cool. I don't think I saw that photo. Was it on
I'll
Twitter?
have to show. I'll find it. I've got it somewhere. But
It's
yeah,
somewhere. Oh, I would love to see that. Now, when I met you in Salt Lake, I gushed on how well you guys wrote Beverly Crusher, and especially in your books as well. It was stuff that the fans wanted to see on TV that we just didn't really get. So, was that your inspiration with writing the character? Like, is that how you thought Beverly should have been shown on screen, or?
I was. I had been writing other books. Like the original series books and the Vanguard books and a couple other things. So I wasn't really involved in the next gen post movie continuity, but
Okay.
they asked me to participate in this 4-book series called the Typhon Pact, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was going to write the next generation book that capped this 4-book sequence, and it was all and because of other things that had been happening in the books, like they had married Beverly and Picard had gotten married and they'd had a kid, or they were going to have a kid at that point. And so Margaret Clark, my editor at Simon and Schuster, asked me if I would be interested in taking on the task of writing the first Picard is now a dad book. and and the reason she did that is because I was a fairly new father at the time, and she thought that I could channel a lot of that angst and fatigue and daddy stuff into the
Mm-hmm.
book. Which she was right. It actually did help. And then so I'd never given it a lot of thought about that, but once I had that, I was spared the trauma of having to name the kid or show a birth scene. She asked me not to do that. She said just set it like a year after all of that, so that you can avoid all the sleepless nights and dirty diapers or whatever, or most of
Yeah.
it anyway. And so I said, okay, that's fine. And so I did that thinking it would be a one, and then they sent me back to my corner to write original series books or whatever. And then somehow I ended up being like the next generation writer from that point forward. And so it was a political book. That's what I remember. It was a political book. So there was a lot of stuff like that, which is not my favorite thing to write, but I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I set up all these questions about the Andorian reproductive crisis and Picard and Beverly as new parents. And I basically just wrote Beverly and Jean-Luc the way my wife and I were at that age when we were having our kids. It's like the same kind of, you're tired, you're angry, you're snippy. There's pea soup on my pants leg when I go to work, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got thrown into this mix and like, well, I don't recognize half these characters, because they had replaced certain characters with newly created characters just for the books,
Yeah.
like Teresa Chen,
Mm-hmm.
who ended
Yeah.
up being one of my very favorite characters to write for. I just loved the dynamic between her and Picard, and
Yeah.
I quickly became enamored with the idea of, if you are a follower of the NCIS television series, she Teresa Chen is Abby Shuto to Picard's Jethro Gibbs, Leroy Jethro Gibbs,
Oh, okay.
and so it's like, so he tolerates her more so than he might do from somebody else, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I love the fact that I could use Teresa Chen to look at the familiar characters through a new set of eyes and show her responses as these seasoned people that we've watched and we've read them react to all form of crises. So we have a general idea of how they're going to react, to a given situation. We basically know
Yeah.
how Picard's first impulse is during facing the unknown, but it's different when it's being observed through another party who's not familiar with them, or not familiar with how they react, or they don't have that longevity of familiarity with with their captain or whatever. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was fun. It opened up a lot of opportunities for me to explore Picard and the other known characters in a way that I couldn't do before, because I
Mm-hmm.
had official characters that were part of the crew now that I could use as a point of view, and dig into the people that we already know and not make it feel like, something you've read 100 times, hopefully, if I did it right.
Oh, I
And
think you
then,
did it right. I mean,
I mean, it
I
was weird
think,
because they gave me this political thing, and I was like, okay. And then I went away and I wrote a couple other books, and they brought me back for another mini series called The Fall. And this was a 5-book arc that was going to cross over DS9 and Voyager elements and Next Gen. And they wanted me to write the 5th book in that sequence, which was also a Next Generation book primarily. And I'm like, wait a minute, it's another political thing with a lot of the same questions that I asked in the first book that I did like 4 years ago. And so, and I said, all right, but I'm not the political stuff is not my favorite part of Star Trek. I would
mm-hmm.
really like to set this up so that they can be explorers again. You know, let's
Yeah.
can I do that? Can I set them up so that their next adventure, whoever writes it, gets to go out and do a let's explore strange new worlds kind of thing?
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I left it as open ended as possible, because I had no idea who the next writer might be. There was no assumption that I would write the next one. I just figured
Okay.
they would send me off to write something else, because again, I
Mm-hmm.
was writing original series and a couple of other things at the same time, and I just figured it'd be somebody else's run in the turn in the saddle, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
circle back sometime down the road. Lo and behold, the first person to get a Next Generation book after The Fall was me, and so I'm like, oh well, wow, I would have done things differently if I knew I was gonna be the guy, and so that became Armageddon Zero, the first book that I wrote where they're exploring again. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, I'm writing all the Next Generation books, or most of them. I'm like, all of a sudden, there's like 3 or 4 more coming my way over
There
the
was a
next
lot of
decade.
TNG on your list as I was going
Yeah,
down.
I did not plan that, and I never had the expectation, because up until that point, there wasn't one person writing Next Generation books. There were multiple authors doing Next Generation books. And so I just
Yeah.
assumed that, I was one person who would step in, do a book, step out, the next person would take it, and off we go. I had
Yeah.
no clue that I would end up being, however many I ended up writing, 3 or 4 more, and then helping cap it off. So it was fun, but I got to have more fun with the characters, because now with every book I could, have a little bit more fun with certain characters. I mean, we still didn't get
Mm-hmm.
to everybody. It's amazing that
Right.
we still didn't get to everybody. But that's, I don't know that the people who buy Star Trek novels want to read about the con officer that they don't know from the television shows or the movie. They want to write. They want some familiarity, and they'll indulge
Mm-hmm.
us for a little while, but not to the exclusion of their favorite characters. So it's definitely a balancing act, when you're writing tie-in
Yeah.
fiction like that.
Yeah. And I think also you know a lot about Star Trek. That's what I've learned, talking to you over this last year. And I think that's what helped with all the books that you've written. Just you have this passion, especially for the next, these characters that we all know and love. And, I feel that love and passion for these characters. Well, I listen to Audible because sometimes I'll listen to it at work and I'm just
Mhm.
hearing it and I'm all like, I get it. Like I totally get it. Especially as a new fan, it was like so exciting to hear these stories, especially in a totally different way than what I was watching, episodic television, which
Right.
has its problems. But of course, that comes into our topic of why you're here, your new book, which is Pliable Truths, and it's set in the TNG DS9 era. And I loved how you filled in the holes, like how Riker won in Dabo at Cork's Bar with the vouchers, or just the fact that you brought up the PTSD with Picard and Gul Madrid. I love Chain in Command Part 2. Patrick Stewart and David Warner, amazing. Loved those scenes. But then there was nothing after that. It was just, okay, back to episodic television, and so I really, really loved how you put that into your story. So, how did this whole idea come about?
So this is the first time that I've revisited, Next Gen since the Coda trilogy. And so they specifically asked me to write a next generation novel that was set during the television series, which is something that I had not previously done. The only time I'd ever done anything TNG TV related was a short story that came for an anthology that came out years ago. And so this would be my first time doing this. So, but I mean, I've done similar type stories for the original series, so I didn't think it would be too difficult. It's just a matter of finding, a spot that's interesting. And then they upped the ante by asking me to also make it a crossover with DS9. And I said, well, that narrows the scope a little bit as far as where I can set it, because there's only about a year and a half, give or take, a season and a half, give or take, of where those two shows overlap. And, because the DS9 premiered about the midway point of season 6 of Next Gen. And, TNG concluded the following season. And then there's a gap between it and the movie, or the first movie. And so I'm like, okay, well, that narrows the scope a little bit. Now I've got to set it during this time frame. And, oh, wait a minute, Worf doesn't know anybody on the station, because there's a whole 2-hour episode devoted to him being introduced to everybody when he comes on to DS9 during the 4th year. I mean, he might. There's room for doubt that he may have met a couple of people, but it seems like he definitely didn't know certain individuals, particularly most of the Starfleet people. And
Right.
so I'm like, okay, well, the easiest thing to do would be, I could set it before the Starfleet people come. I started thinking about that. I could set it before the DS9 folks show, or like Cisco and company show up. I'm like, but that's still a pretty narrow gap, because there's the Cardassian occupation that I have to deal with. And then I realized there's, the gap between Chain of Command and the premiere of DS9 is really not that long internally, like the internal Trek timeline. There's not a lot of room. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if Picard was somehow pulled into the aftermath of the Cardassian occupation and having to deal with Cardassians while still traumatized from what happened to him in Chain of Command? And so I pitched that idea, and, just as the A plot, and my editor was like, okay, go with that. And I said, but this also affords me some opportunities. I get to play with, why O'Brien decided to make the switch from the Enterprise to DS9.
Yeah.
How did he convince his wife to go along with that idea? And, and I thought it'd be fun to show, to be able to pair up certain Next Gen characters and DS9 characters. Like, for some reason, the idea of Crusher and Kira teaming up to do something was something that happened really quickly. I wrote that down. And then I thought I would throw Keiko into the mix, because, I know she didn't really get used, I think, to her full potential on the show.
Right.
So I was like looking for a way to give her a spotlight before that happens. And then
There's literally only one scene between Beverly and Keiko in the entire Next Generation. So when
it's
I
insane,
was
right?
reading the book, I was
Yeah.
all like, finally, Keiko and Crusher
Yeah,
together.
it's just really, I mean, the episodes being what they are, it's like, and she was a recurring character. She wasn't even part of the main cast. And, for that matter, neither was O'Brien. O'Brien's a recurring
Right.
character in Next Gen. And so, and I thought, well, there's a plausible way that he would decide to make that transfer, but let's have some fun with it. And then, of course, there was, what's Garrick doing at this point in time? And, what's Quark doing at this point in time? And I'm like, well, I don't have the Starfleet people from DS9, but I certainly have the non-Starfleet folks that I can play with. And so that opened up the idea of, oh, that's right. There's a story about Riker and the Dabo thing. So I can throw that in there somewhere. And, Ducat and Garrick, and, and then, I don't want to spoil the book too much, but, once other Cardassian characters start showing up in the pages of the book, I thought, well, there's opportunities between, these characters to have their moments. And, of course, Odo is there, and he's not happy with Garrick and all that sort of thing. So it was kind of fun to partner them and put the Next Gen people into the DS9 environment and let them work away from their comfort zones a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
particularly with the technical issues that LaForge and the group deal with over the course of the
Yeah.
book. And then, of course, I needed something interesting for Worf to do away from all of that because he doesn't know anybody. And so my original idea was I was going to have the prison planet story on Bajor, but it didn't make any
Okay.
sense that they could be undetected, you know. So that quickly went away, and I came up with the other planet idea. And I'm like, well, now I've got a reason to send, you know, at least some of the Enterprise crew characters to this other problem. So that
Right.
begat the whole, you know, there's a prisoner on the planet who knows Ro and gets a message out, and then, you know, the Enterprise goes and deals with that situation. So I was able to deftly, hopefully, you know, somewhat deftly sidestep the whole Worf doesn't know anybody conundrum. Um,
Well, I
so
think you did a great job. And I love that you did add Ro into it because originally Ro was supposed to be part of DS9,
mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
but then that's when we got
and
Kira. So it was a nice little
in hindsight, I
transition, I
probably wish
guess.
I could have involved her a little bit more, but they asked me to scale back, you know, the little bit on the ending. Like they didn't want a big firefight at the end with all of our guys, and so I said, well, I need to have some kind of overthrow of the prison camp, or it doesn't make any sense. So,
Yeah.
um, I'm a big fan of movies like, you know, Stalag 17, The Great Escape, Bridge over the River Kwai. So I love the idea of the prison planet and the dastardly deeds that are going on there behind closed
Mm-hmm.
doors. So
Yeah.
I love a good prison break.
Now, when I read chapter 6, which is the crusher scene, as I call it, of them having their little one-on-one that we only got
Mm-hmm.
like 5 times in the entire series, I remember tweeting and I'm all like, chapter 6 tagged you crying emoji. Um, I greatly appreciate it, but what I did like is how you paced it because even at the end, you know, she's still they're not really around each other because they're doing their different things, but she's all like, "Oh, I hope he's okay," you know, glad Deanna's with them kind of thing. And that felt very Beverly, you know, to to think of Jean-Luc during that time because it was a tough time for him.
It was, I think I remember writing the outline, and I remember that. I think my first version of that story was it would have been a Troy scene with him, like leading up to what happens on the station, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, this is a great moment for Crusher to do something like this before going off on her own subplot.
Yeah.
So I reworked that, and I'm glad I did because it gave me a chance to kind of revisit that dynamic that I used to like doing in the other books before Coda. You know, with before that we ended with Coda. I mean, I couldn't do the same things with, you know, with their relationship that I
Right.
did with Coda, but we could hint at, you know, what's to come as far as, you know, their eventual how the screen treats them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but it was nice to get into that vibe for a little bit, you know, kind of like somewhat close to what we used to do back in the next gen books before Coda. And then
Yeah.
the other opportunity that the book presented was, you know, we turned off the Litverse, as fans call it, and, you know, but we have all these characters that we created across all these different ships and crews and books, and I'm like, wouldn't it be fun to have certain characters pop up in a different way? Like, so that's why
Different way.
Dr. Trop, you know, is the CMO of the other ship in the book. I brought him
Mm-hmm.
back from, and, you know, you see like the guys who went off to be Starfleet Corps of Engineers are in the come of the later scenes. And you know, I think all the different chief engineers or something that the Enterprise had at one point during the first season, you know, I was like, it'd be
Yeah.
fun to do that. I mean, I've always, even when we knew we were turning off the lights with the Litverse, it's like, yeah, but we got all these cool characters, and it'd be a shame to waste them. You know, there's got to be a way to bring in, you know, not all of them, but, you know, certain ones from time to time, sparingly, we might be able to get away with it and not feel like we're overdoing it. I mean, and Jim
Yeah.
Swallow started that by having different versions of like Christine Vale in his Picard novel, you know, set on the Titan. And so we're
Mm-hmm.
like, well, yeah, that's a good idea. Why not? Well, you know, we can do that. You know, plus we've already spent all this time developing these characters. Why create other ones from scratch? So,
Exactly, exactly. And the one thing about, because, you know, my favorite episodes are pretty much all Beverly heavy,
mhm.
right? It's like Attached and Genesis and things like that. But I love Chain and Command just because of, you know, what I said earlier. But there was that one scene where Gul Madrid was going to let him go, but then he mentioned, oh, he'll have to interrogate the human female, and that's where Picard stops. He's like,
Right,
who are you talking about, right? And it's a
right.
very powerful scene, and then he ends up staying because he's not sure if he has Beverly. And so I liked how it kind of connects because we don't know just from the show if he ever told her, if she ever knew that, but then for you to have Beverly just thinking of him and worrying about him but knowing he's okay. I felt that was a good connection between the two, between the show and what you wrote.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thank you. I don't think it's a stretch because even as early as the second episode of Next Gen, there's an obvious attraction between the characters.
Yeah.
The pilot is kind of weird in that regard because they're so
Yeah.
cold toward each other, and I'm just, and then by the second by the first regular hour episode, that's gone,
Yeah.
and it's just, that's one of the things I don't really like about the pilot. Whenever I rewatch the pilot and I see how those two interact in the scenes they have together, it just feels so forced and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I understand some initial awkwardness because they probably haven't seen each other in quite a while, but it's like, come on, they were best friends and all that. He was married, she was married to his best friend and all that. So there's, and she's a doctor. So, empathy is second nature to her. So it's like, come on, give the dude a break, and then it's just, but I mean, it was weird because, within I think the first episode is the Naked Now where they get the lowering of the indications. Yeah. And I'm like, so obviously there's an attraction there that this thing exploited. So it's like being drunk, just, lets out your inner you that you keep locked down,
Mm-hmm.
So, so I've always subscribed to the idea that they always had mutual feelings for each other, even if it was unrequited or not quite so serious, or Picard thought more of it than she did, or whatever, or vice versa. But there was always that. So I always I leaned into that scene with that in mind, thinking I'm safe. This is safe territory for me. I'm not going out of bounds.
Safety. Yeah, exactly. Now, of course, Beverly Crusher is making comeback, not only being on Picard and very small treks, which is very hard to talk about, but she at least did it. But also she did Prodigy.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything about this current Beverly we're seeing on screen that you would love to write about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that I don't know what I would do with the characters at that point in their lives, after Picard season 3. I don't know what I would do. It's hard to say. But I would definitely love to
say a lot happened in 20 years.
A lot happened in 20 years, and not all of it makes sense. Like, I remember wrestling with the timeline of it all when we were reading the scripts. And I was just like, how old is this guy? Because how young is this kid? Because the dude on stage, the screen does not look like the kid that has to be this age in this script. And so, it was interesting. And I'm like, well, there's a lot that went on, and the timeline is a little mushy. You have to kind of hand wave a little things here and there to make it all fit. A little bit.
I'm very much into the timelines. Like, I pay attention to dates, and Jack.
Oh, we argued about dates. Every time I get a new script, I'm like, wait a minute, the last script says this, and now you're saying this, and this kid's like 15 or whatever. And I'm just, I remember going back over it and trying to help it all make sense. And it was an interesting evolution. Watching that show evolve was quite something.
Right. Now, did you happen to see season 2 of Prodigy?
Yes, I did. Yep. It was great. I enjoyed it. I mean, I knew it was going to be. I knew it was going to be good. 2 years ago when I read the scripts. I just had to shut up about it for 2 years. No, I mean,
must have been so hard.
It was hard. It was hard. I mean, I knew when I read the first script for the first season, the first handful of scripts for the first season, I said, this is going to be one of the best things this group has done. It's a great on-ramp. It's a great way to introduce younger kids to Star Trek. I mean, I know it's written, as I was telling somebody the other day, I said, it's written with younger kids in mind, but it's not a kid's show. I mean, it's not a little kid's show. It's like the plot is very dense, particularly in season 2. There's a lot of moving parts in season 2. And I know a lot of grownups who can't keep all those balls straight. And, but I like that because it's written in a way that's approachable for a younger audience, but it doesn't talk down to them. It doesn't condescend or patronize them. I just love the storyline. I thought it was very intricate and and provided so many opportunities for things. Like when they brought in Wesley, I was like, are you kidding me? Really? That's a great idea. Wesley comes in to help with a timeline crisis. Great idea, guys. And
it was funny because I was like, this is very Coda.
Yeah. No, it was great. It was fun to watch it though. And I love the way
it was great. Yeah.
They took him in a different direction. And I really love the direction they took him in. It's just infectious to watch and listen to Will Wheaton giving voice to the character. And I'm just like, and I mean, I'm just scratching notes about what I might do with all of this information. Because, now that the travelers and the people who gave us Gary 7 are the same, and they're connected. I'm just like, my brain is exploding with, I want to pitch this idea to as a novel. I was like, I have thoughts about all of this,
Yeah.
So
It was funny because when there's a scene, and I believe it has to do with the original series episode. I want to say it was Assignment Earth,
Simon Earth, yeah.
and because it's supposed to be like the 70s kind of office and everything.
Yeah.
I was all like, I don't know the original series very well, but I was like, that must be the episode with Terry Garr and the Black Cat. That's all.
Yeah, it's exactly right. They recreated the office. They kind of gave it a little bit of an update, but it's the same office. And like he opens up the
I was
computer.
like,
That's the
yeah,
computer
I was
from
like,
the
I
original episode.
recognize it. I was,
And I'm just
it was
like,
so.
oh, my brain's like, I have all these thoughts and I've been writing them
But
down
like,
and trying to make sense of them.
I'm surprised Twitter didn't break because everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, did you see this?" And then there's even people who are now watching it now are pointing things out. I was like, I didn't even see it on my third or fourth rewatch. I'm just like,
There's a lot of
oh
Easter eggs
man,
baked into that. There's stuff that I just saw for the first time because a lot of it's visual. And so that kind
yeah,
of stuff is not in the script. And so, if they decide to leave a visual gag hanging on the wall or something, I don't know that
uh-huh,
that's going to be there. A lot of times I don't know it's there until I see the episode. So
yeah,
it's fun to watch it as a fan, even with the
yeah,
inside knowledge. Like I knew how the story was going to unfold, but that didn't mean I didn't enjoy watching it because it was a lot of fun to see him realize it. Yeah, like I said, that Wesley Doctor Who makes me, or Wesley Crusher Time Lord makes me want to write stuff. So
Oh, I've been wanting a crossover between Doctor Who and Wesley like since I became a fan. I was like, it could happen. And they
I
did just make a little joke in this 15th Doctor where
mhm.
she was all like, "Oh, just like the antimatter from Star Trek." He's like, "We got to visit them one day." I was like, "Right there, right there. We can have a crossover.
Yeah.
Like, call Will Wheaton right now."
They did do a comics crossover years ago with Matt Smith's
I heard
Doctor,
about that.
and
Yeah.
and um, and I had wanted to do one with Gary Seven and either the third or the fourth Doctor because there was a period during those two Doctors where he has been exiled to Earth by the Time Lords, and he could not travel on the TARDIS. He could not do any of that stuff. He was stuck on Earth, in exile. But he still got up to all the sorts of adventures, because he's working with the unit folks and the Brigadier and all
Oh.
those guys. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, wouldn't that be great to have Gary Seven and one of those two versions of the Doctor working together on a threat, you know? And
Yeah.
so,
No, it would be so interesting, but Wesley was I said it was very 11th Doctor. I thought he
mhm.
had a bit of that Matt Smith, but a little bit of David. Um, and I did the interview with Aaron Walke, and he had mentioned, there was definitely some Doctor Who inspiration in that. So it just made me so excited. Especially, I'm also a River Song fan. I mean, I think Wesley said no one likes spoilers. I was like, River, right there.
Yeah.
Dow's like timey wimey. I'm like, this is awesome. Like my worlds are colliding in the best way possible.
Any for your thoughts?
Now, I did get one fan question, and this actually works perfectly because he wants to know. So, this is from Jay. He wants to know: is your newest novel, Pliable Truths, considered part of canon, or are the novels still considered beta unless referenced on screen?
Yeah, none of the novels are canon. They are at best. I mean, they're Star Trek does not subscribe to a levels of canon like alpha, beta, and all that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they are either canon or they're not. And in the case of Star Trek novels, they're not. That said, we endeavor to be consistent with the canon as we know it when we write the book.
Right.
So it's as consistent and fits in as seamlessly as possible with the on-screen canon that we are able as we are able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, some of them, a lot of them get overwritten, or get the events are told in a different way when they finally do something similar. So, no, none of the Star Trek novels are canon, but that doesn't make them any. I would hope it doesn't make them any less entertaining or fun to read.
Oh
Uh,
no.
it's kind of like when I tell people, the Titanic did not sink intact; it broke up and cannot ever be raised. But that doesn't make Raise the Titanic any less of a thrilling adventure story. And
Right.
and just like the War of the Worlds cannot obviously happen because there are no Martians, that doesn't mean that's not a great story. That's how I view Star Trek as. And I guess another way of looking at it is the novels and the comics and the other expanded universe offerings are, you could consider the actual on-screen events of these characters as history, and then the other stuff is historical fiction. That's one way to address all the discrepancies and things between the different types of books and the different novels and whatnot, and keep it all straight in your head. It's like, because they used to write a lot of dime novels and pulp fiction about historical figures all the time. Billy the Kid, Elliot Ness. These are the same in my brain. It works the same way. So that helps me keep it all straight and keeps it sane.
Well, that was our redhead alert, and this one is a good one, guys, because, like I said earlier, I sat down with Aaron Welke, co-executive producer and writer of Star Trek Prodigy. We talked all things Crusher in Season 2, and it was a joy. This episode is going to drop next Friday, which is my birthday, July 26th, at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so meet me in the chat live, and we will discuss all about what he has to say. And also, don't forget that you guys can like and subscribe this video and find me on Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, any of your favorite audio podcast apps. You can buy me a coffee by scanning that barcode on the top right. And you could find Crusher Convo merch at TeePublic. And of course, all this information is at crusherconvo.com. Well, you know what, Dayton? Thank you so much for joining me tonight. You are a joy to talk with, and I love talking Star Trek with you. And Beverly Crusher. Like, I could do it for so long. You have so many ideas, and you have such love for it. It's so great to be able to share that with you. Is there anything that you would like to plug, or where people can find you?
You can find me at DaytonWard.com. That's my launching pad for all the other links to my social media platform, the Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that other stuff. My Amazon page is on there, I think. I call it my little corner of internet banality. I'm not a huge blogger presence, but I try to make it entertaining for the people who stop by.
Right.
And as far as new stuff, the new Next Generation novel, Pliable Truths, is out there in stores. And of course, the Marvel book that Kevin and I wrote, Captain America, Steve Rogers Declassified, is also in stores. So it came out in end of June. So check them out.
I had to hunt for this. We only have I feel like one bookstore left in Idaho, which is just like one Barnes and Nobles. I had to go hunt this down, but I found it.
If they don't have it on the shelf, they'll order it for you. So don't forget that.
Yes.
Just because it's not on the shelf doesn't mean you're out of luck. They will happily order it for you to come pick up in their store. And then what that usually means is they'll order another one to put on the shelf because you have expressed interest and they think, well, maybe somebody else will. So
there we go. Oh man, I should have done that. Just been like, I would have bought it, then come back like, oh, I can't find the book, and then they order it, and then then there'll be more. Well, again, thank you, Dayton, for taking your time. Guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Live long and prosper.
Crusher out.